People will think I've lost my mind when I say that, but you can't tell that to my portfolio. We got a child keyer, a hot keyer, and 3 equipment runners in the top 5. That's pretty healthy. After that, you've got Tatsu, copier, Yuma running mostly own equipment, I believe. Let's take a look at them. Watching Kantz talk about, like, if it gets down to, 0.6, I'm going to start defending it myself. And there was like this idea that like nobody's going to play. This is the one that we're going to put out into the world as here's what Bittensor can do. And they decided to trust Namaré and John Durbin and the whole team at Rayon Labs. And that's why we're in this position. Dude, first of all, like February of last year, so a year and 2 months ago now, I almost just shut the thing down. He even said that he, Jacob Steves, Bittensor co-founder, contributed, I believe, to their incentive mechanism. If the Cabal knew what was up, they would have came in and got so deep into alpha tokens early on that they would...
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we are joined by Keith Singery, the Bittensor Guru, diving deep into subnet evaluation tactics, market trends, and investment strategies. Keith unpacks the complexities of validator management, portfolio allocation, and the art of vibe investing, while underscoring the vital role of community engagement and decentralization in driving Bittensor's evolution. He shares trading insights, market dynamics, and guides us through the metagraph, unveiling subnets, stats, and crypto maneuvers through his one-of-a-kind perspective. Now, back to Keith with the 36th Ventura Labs podcast. Keith, the Bittensor Guru, welcome back. How you feeling, my man?
Great. Thanks, Grant. Glad to be here. This is, I think, visit number 2 to the Ventura podcast.
Yeah. Second of many.
Right.
Yeah, what's on your mind, man? What have you been thinking about? What's the guru been thinking about recently?
Dude, we're coming off like probably one of the craziest nights or last sort of 12 hours of DTAU and alpha swapping. We're recording this on around, midday Friday in the US. And I think we might have hit 2.1. We hit 2.09 for sure. Yeah. And I think yesterday we were trading, down at one point in like the 1.8s, So we saw like almost like a 15% jump in the alpha prices in a span of like less than 24 hours. And I'm watching the momentum grow on not only in social media, but just the activity on the charts. I mean, I live and breathe this stuff every day. Like, dude, just to give you an idea, my wife the other day is like, honey, your hygiene is starting to slip a little bit lately. I'm like, it's Subnet summer. I can't keep up with with the showers even. I just like, I'm trying to brush my teeth every day, but I can't stop getting into the, digging into Tau stats, jumping on back prop. Spend a little time on like the Tau XYZ, checking that out. Mostly I'm on Tau stats, and then Tau app, Tau.app for all the metrics and stuff. And just watching the whole thing develop and everyone kind of figure out that like, what? There's only 5% of the staked. Of the staked Tau, I think it's like 6.8% of all staked Tau, because there's 27.5% that's floating around out there on wallets that isn't even staked. Mostly that's on exchanges, right? But of the total Tau in circulation, we're floating right around 5%. And there was so much, anxiety like 45 days ago when we're down in like the 1.08 range, and I'm in the RAW channel on Discord watching Kantz talk about like, if it gets down to 0.6, I'm going to start defending it myself. And there was like this idea that like nobody's going to play, but it turns out that triple digit APR and some of the stuff that like these top 10 and even top 20 and even really the top 30 at this point subnets are dropping, just the different developments and all the marketing that they're doing at a totally different level than they were back when it really didn't matter, because you only had to get the validators on board, has caused us to sort of explode. You're even seeing it on the price right now. We're starting to, I said something earlier, like there's going to be a great decoupling, from not only Bitcoin, which we've been tied to like some kind of sinking anchor. I want to swear, but I'll try and not swear on this pod as much. We can keep it family friendly. But the economy in general, and basically there's so much going on in the ecosystem that you just can't hold us down anymore. It's starting to overflow from root into alpha. It's overflowing from everyone's stable coins and Bitcoin wallets into Tau. And I think you're going to continue to see it for, the years to come.
So far, we've seen a peak, I think, of like 3.9 subnet sum, and the lowest we've seen, like you said, was 1.08. And everybody was talking about, it could go to 0.6, and then if it goes below 1, it pushes us back up to 1.
Right.
What do you make of the future of this subnet sum? How do you think that's going to play out? We've seen like 3 kind of waves so far of subnet prices. Do you think it just keeps cycling like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, there's 2 ways to look at this thing really that I see out there. There's like the Tau stats and Tau XYZ, which focus on the ratio, the subnet to, the subnet price is essentially the alpha to Tau ratio. So like for Chutes, whatever it is today, 0.36 or something. And then you have the other style of looking at it, which is like the backprop style or the Tau.app style, where you're pricing the subnet ratio, but using the price of Tau on top of that ratio. So like, let's say we're trading at 200 for Tau, and Chutes is trading at 0.3, then it would be $60 or whatever, right, per Chutes. And from day one, I have never looked at the price of Tau on top of the ratio, because I am always just going to assume that as this stuff starts to catch hold and the momentum starts to grow, that the price of Tau will follow in the way that it needs to. And that's why I really only look at the ratio. So that's how I look at it. And where do I think we're going to land? Well, it was very different early on when you're trying to like prognosticate the ratios that you're buying into, because at least I was looking at it in the early stages from like, how much APR do I need when this thing gets cut in half? Like, so that I don't lose my shirt. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. And that's how I was looking at all of the subnets early on. So that's where I was like placing my bets. And that's also how everyone else was probably doing it, because if you look at like the top wallets and stuff, there aren't that many outliers as far as people that were slamming thousands of Tau into the alpha early on. And it was this idea that the ratios were going to continue to drop. But what we've seen is that the sell pressure on these subnets appears to be pretty weak. And of course, the major sell pressure early on was primarily coming from root, which is for sure like, it's at least 40% less than it was when we launched. Maybe we're getting closer to 45 at this point. I have lost basically, I don't even know like what day it is anymore. I don't know like some stuff I think I swapped into like 3 weeks ago, I got into 2 days ago. So it's hard for me to keep track of like what's actually going on. That's why I go to Tau.app all the time and look at the metrics. But at this stage, now you're trying to figure out like, when is the momentum going to stop? Because I don't think that it will, because mainly what the problem is that if you're moving over from root into these ratios now that are like 1.5x what we kind of were trading at for a long time, which was around the 1.2, 1.3 range. We spent a lot of time in the last 2 months in the total subnet price range of 1.2, 1.3. And then, we've been fluctuating up and down, but now we're about 50% above that. But what it looks like is every time that we dip, all of these wallets step in from root to gobble up the sales. And it's because the earlier that you get in this stuff and start stacking in the APR, you are getting ahead of like the waterfall that's going to come in and continue to raise the tide that raises all wallets here. And I don't see it stopping, mainly because the people on root are conservative and they're trying to play this game of like, hey, if I stay out long enough, I might be the one that gets a lot of my money in before this thing takes off. But people are having a hard time sitting on their hands because it just keeps moving up, you know?
Yeah. You think so? You think people are just going to get priced out of the market and then capitulate and then buy like at whatever price eventually? Because the number's like 250% APY, right? That people are talking about.
Yeah, it's more like 250% on, until the first halving, because most of the subnets are less than 150%. Some of them are even less than 100%, no matter if you're staking to a weight copy or not. So you're really not looking at 250 APY unless you got in real early, maybe back 45 days ago or something. So yeah, it's not that high anymore. But what you're also able to factor in now is the price appreciation, which at least I wasn't factoring in, in the beginning, and that's the motivator that's keeping Tau flowing into these subnets.
And how allocated would you say you are in terms of your portfolio percentage? Are you 50% allocated so far, or you got everything in, or you're playing it cautious?
Yeah, I'm more than 50% at this point, but I was less than 50% until we did this big pump. So I thought I would be, kind of playing it conservative, but now I find myself, I don't know, I'm probably 70% in alpha at this point. I don't know the exact math, but mainly that's because of the appreciation that we've experienced since like the 1.2, 1.3 range, which is when I tried to move my funds in more. As I saw the momentum coming up from 1.8, I just said, screw it, But like early on, and you could look at the posts from the last, like, nobody's going to do this, but like over the last, 45 days and see there was probably like a week or maybe 10-day period where I'm like, better be careful swapping into these things. It's not that easy. At one point I was down a ton, because we pumped up to like 1.7 ish, and I started getting it in, and then all of a sudden we're back down to 1.2, and that's a pretty deep haircut. That's like a 30% haircut. So I was, watching the APR pretty closely. Then I didn't swap out of stuff really because that's not how I play the game. I just jump in and just start swimming, and I'm not gonna be playing the game back and forth of trying to trade in and out of these things. It's a tax nightmare anyway. For me and anyone else that has to pay, short-term gains.
Well, I mean, it is a staking maneuver, so does it really count?
I have a paper in my inbox that argues exactly that, and I'm going to present it to the tax folks and see what they say. So I hope, we'll see. I don't know where it's going to land. I'm sure there'll be many interpretations of how to apply tax law to dynamic Tau and recommendations and things like that. In the end, everyone has to sort of make their own argument. I doubt we're going to get any official guidance,
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting how that plays out. When you allocate, you said you're kind of more like just buy and hold. You're not really trading in and out of these things real quick.
Right.
Are you spreading it around? Are you like heavily allocated into a few names, or it's like you have a holding in a ton of different subnets?
I think I'm in like 25 subnets roughly. Yeah, like when I started, I was thinking I'll just get in, these 5 or whatever, these 3, and then like you buy into the 3, and then you're like, oh, I gotta add this one. It looks pretty good, And then like all of a sudden you're like, well, we got the other 3 from Macrocosmos. We might as well get a little of the other 2 and round out the whole basket. And then you're seeing like, I don't know, something move from 20th up to 15th, and it's looking pretty good. And you're like, wow, I wasn't going to buy that, but okay. And all of a sudden you realize you got a pretty mixed bag. So that's where I'm at now. I'm still trying to concentrate on like my heavy hitters, and like everyone, and you've seen this happen with the emissions. It's very like top heavy, and a lot of the portfolios are of course top heavy as well, especially for people that traded early, because most of your price appreciation has happened on those, top 5 subnets, mainly the ones from, top 10, I guess, subnets. Those are the ones that have seen the bigger moves.
Yeah. Holy shit! I lost my train of thought. There's so many
I'll tell you
directions I
something
could
that I
take
was
this.
thinking about based on a question you asked earlier. You're talking about like how am I allocating to these things? What do I think about the ratios? There's also this other train of thought that's like looking at the market cap, and it's like, oh, Chutes is only at 50 million. Like if these guys, tried to raise money from VCs, they'd be getting, 10 times that or whatever. Or like some people look at the FDV, which is like the diluted value value once you've allocated all the coins out at the current rate or all the alpha out at the current rate. Then you can do the math like, oh, so is the company of the subnet worth that much? I don't look at any of that stuff either. I don't, because I understand where everyone's coming from, and people that have a lot of money, especially the ones that have a lot of business experience from the VC side or investing in different things, are used to looking at those and coming up with their calculations and figuring out blah blah blah. Dude, I just look at like, where's that subnet sitting? What's it valued at? What do I think the community is going to take it to? Who is it integrating with? I look at the ratio, of course. Where do I expect it to land? Like, where can the community continue to carry this thing? Is it pumping because someone posted about it, 2 days ago, or is it organically getting there because it just keeps shipping every week? And that's the thing that I focus on. And the other thing that I do when I'm trying to pick subnets is I go out and use the thing. Like, I go in and use the Dataverse from Macrocosmos and look at they have this like nebulous thing where you can kind of click around. Maybe you clicked through that. I know you had those guys on the other day. They probably did a demo. I don't remember. Or like go on to like the TensorPlex stuff with Dojo and look at the demos of what the people are actually doing. The humans are actually selecting like the 4 different creations from the different artificial intelligence models and rating which one is best. And you can go through and look and see like what is happening on the subnet, or jump into Chutes and spin up any model, anything from Hugging Face, or use one of the ones that's hot already, and you could just kind of like ping it and interact with it and get some tokens flowing. So like, if I can't get my hands around like what this thing is doing, then I have a hard time putting my cash into it. Some of these subnets, not cash, but my Tau. Some of these, I don't have any cash anymore. All my wealth is measured in Tau anyway, so that's all I have. But the thing is like, in this current state of valuing these things, you're going to have subnets like Templar where like I don't know, I can't really see what it's doing. I can look at the loss curve that everyone loves, and I can hear Const, talk about it, and I can hear him on the novelty search, but like I don't know like really what's coming out of there, and there's all these for example, like all the prediction subnets that are doing Bitcoin prices or whatever else. Like, I'm not trading with that stuff. So, and a lot of it isn't even available to trade with. It's not like you can just like, there was a bot for a while, like 6 months ago, Trade with Dale or something, that was based on one of the subnets. But you can't really even take what these subnets are producing and create value for yourself unless you can get your hands on it. So those are the subnets that I like. You've seen one of the ones that's blown me out of the water recently was this 404 subnet, which does like the 3D generation, and you can jump on there and see some of the environments that have been created with the different individual 3D objects from that subnet. You can generate them themselves. Those are the type of things that I like to do to get a sense of the value of that subnet, because anybody can do that. You don't need to know anything about artificial intelligence. You can just go on go onto the website or the front end or whatever, use the thing, and then determine yourself, like, is this worth me putting my money into,
How much do you factor in the team behind it? Or is it all about the product that you can use from it? How do you balance the two when deciding, okay, I'm going to invest here?
I've had most of the teams on, my pod over the last 2 years or so at this point. So I like knowing the team. I would say, though, and if I don't know the team, sometimes I get to know the team from novelty search, because they are usually ahead of the curve on having those guys on. And they've been doing really good every week of bringing on a new team. So that's great, because I like to hear the people I like to hear the subnet owners speak and the developers talk, and I can gauge then how interested they are in it, if there's passion behind it, if I think they're doing it for a buck, how well they understand their incentive mechanism, how well they can explain the value proposition of their own subnet. And you start to get a better idea for like how these guys are actually thinking about their position in Bittensor, and that's how I like to invest. Like as someone who's buying and holding, I want to put my Tau into a project that is going to be here in a year and a half, and there's a handful of teams that you for sure know are going to be here, and most of those are now, top 10 projects. But there's also some very, steady teams that have been in the ecosystem now for over a year with their subnets who aren't in the top 10, or some of them aren't even in the top 20. And those are kind of reliable bets who I expect over time will figure out how to position themselves in this new environment,
How do you judge who's going to be here for the long term, or who you think will be here for the long term? Because you get to know a lot of these people personally. What do you look for, or qualities you see in these people?
I look for someone who like bleeds Tau, and bleeds Bittensor. Like the obvious teams that you can see that do that just by the videos that they and the podcast they do that they put out are, of course, like, the Rayon guys, the Targon, the Macrocosmos, and I look for teams that are also developing additional products in the ecosystem, like, for example, TensorPlex, which has things beyond just Dojo that they're involved in. And so when I see teams getting involved in also real life, things, they're showing up at these events, they're getting on stage, the subnet owner is speaking, they're doxed, they're putting their name and their reputation on the line behind their subnets. That's the other thing that I look for, is like who's at the event, who's going to be running the hackathons coming up, at Endgame, who's throwing out 10K, of their own dime to try and incentivize developers to come in and create something novel with their subnet. Like, these are the teams that are out there in the open that are championing not only their subnet but Bittensor itself. And those are the teams that I look for long-term investment.
And then a recent point of contention maybe has been you came out against the price prediction type of subnets. What's the thought process behind that?
Because we've seen like a dozen at this point, maybe more. I'm sure we've seen more, and I just have lost track of them deregistering over, the last 18 months now that we've had subnets. Price prediction subnets are great if they provide value. I should be able to take my stack on some exchange that I can get onto and plug it into some copy trade thing that starts printing a little bit of money. Otherwise, what do I care about what value is it providing to me? When the thing that I said the other day that I actually think is valuable is if we have a few price prediction subnets that are doing some good work, and it's not just for Bitcoin, but for, predictions of basically anything. Could be any of the betting subnets. We have 2 of those at this point. Could be, any of these, subnets that are working on, I think Infinite Games is connected to Polymarket and has that built into their incentive mechanism. I believe I read that the other day when I was looking at. Yeah, so like it's not just, I don't want to see something that's just price prediction, because you could also call Gaia 57 a prediction subnet, right? It's just, it's predicting the moisture content level of the soil instead of the price of Bitcoin the next day. So it's not that the prediction subnets are even limited to just the financial instruments or the commodities or whatever. Where I think the prediction subnets are going to have value is when someone can plug in some sort of thing that is approaching the level of AGI, and it can understand all of the predictions and the accuracy over time of these different subnets, and maybe even incorporate combining them into one another. And for example, take the commodity prediction subnet and start looking at the soil moisture level from 57, and then start doing futures trading on corn in the US, or dumping it because it's expecting a drought, next year based upon blah, blah. Like, when I see a big brain get plugged in that can use them all, then I think there's value in the basket of prediction subnets. But individually, I think it's hard to provide value to the community, especially short-term value, like of these, that would match one of these utility subnets that are in the top 10 that are actually doing real things that you and I can go out and use that add value to our lives today. So those prediction subnets have a longer, I would say, timeline as far as delivering value to the community. And that's why I don't necessarily like when I see them in a price range that I don't, feel, I guess, as earning the emissions that are requisite for that type of contribution to Bittensor. But I do keep an open mind. So if someone proves me wrong with that, I will also be the first one to swap into that subnet, and I'm willing to change my mind on it,
Just in that rant alone, I think you talked about like 3 or 4 different subnets. How do you keep up to date in detail with these subnets to the level that you do?
Dude, I'm like, I don't know, RoboCop or like, plugged into the Matrix or whatever. I look at this stuff all the time on the social media. I'm probably on it too much, scrolling through all the announcements. I flick through the Discords pretty consistently. Like, you got to get comfortable with Discord. I was a moderator for the official Discord for like 6 months or something back in 2022, 23. So I got really good at just like navigating that whole thing. I wasn't even in Discord really before that. And that's where you can get right to the subnet owner immediately. Like I've done it on a few subnets now. I just jump in, post a question, they'll answer it. I'm able to incorporate that into my knowledge of the subnet. I also will frequently ping subnet owners and suggest integration opportunities for them with other subnets, because it like when I see what other subnets are, I know these guys are so plugged into their own stuff. Often they don't have time to look at the wider ecosystem. So as someone who's constantly looking at those things, I try to use that knowledge not only for my own benefits in swapping and trading and everything like that, but also just to grow the connections within the ecosystem. And I've seen some of them form into some partnerships of some material partnerships. So that's always fun. Yeah, man, I just love it, and I'm in it. And like I've tied my entire like I either live or die. I either don't go to work next year, or I go to work next year based upon how well I swap. You know what I'm saying? Like either I have to get a job, because this is right now my job is Bittensor, and it's been Bittensor for a couple years, and that's all I do. So if you have that type of dedication and time to put into the thing, you can for sure start to understand at this level that we're at now, with less than 100 subnets, almost everything that's going on. And there's half of the ecosystem, and you're motivated now, you're properly motivated because it's your own money. Like I always had a really hard time before running the Validator, because I would have to also run, the 50 something subnets that before I quit running the hardware, but also try and stay on top of it enough to properly allocate the emissions. But if I didn't allocate the emissions, okay, I didn't make any more or less. I could give it all, it wasn't going to hurt me or my stakers or even the community that much if I missed a % here or there. Now, if I swap into a subnet because I didn't understand that the incentive mechanism was messed up, or that the mining, was totally taken over and dumping every 3 days, or whatever the problems are and the warts with these subnets, now it stings me personally, and that creates a different, sad to say, but a different level of motivation really to understand everything that's going on. So that's where I come from with it, and why I'm so dialed into this stuff.
And talk about dialed in. How much are you on that metagraph? How much are you looking at that distribution of incentive? The weight copiers V-Trust, or not weight copier, but Validator V-Trust, like those type of things. Are you looking at on-chain transactions and following wallets?
Dude, I live on the transaction log, dude. When I'm swapping into a subnet, I'm watching all of my swaps as they go in, making sure I'm not getting front run, making sure I'm not getting, sandwiched or whatever. And if you know, I see someone, you know, dumping stuff on one of the other subnets, I'll check their wallet and see if they're going to, you know, maybe they got a couple other subnets that I'm already in that I like, and they're going to dump that too. So I'm looking in different wallets all the time. Like, I encourage you, if you have the time and the energy, to really, and you know, enough tau to make it worth it for you, you gotta really look at this stuff and bring up, you know, bring up your favorite tool. Mine is Tau Stats. I know there's others. And I really do stay on that transaction log. I look at the top holders all the time, and I try to see, like, is this person a trader? Are they coming in? Are they going to be out in 2 days? Have they been holding for 40 days or whatever? Are they adding to their position? I look at the validators that are staked to in the top 10 and the top 20. Is this a healthy subnet? Is this subnet a weight copy, you know, weight copy or subnet, which is actually supposed to be, you know, fixed or at least addressed in a greater way pretty soon by something that's coming out, like the version 3 of commit reveal is supposed to be coming, which should fix some of this weight copying stuff. So that's the writing's on the wall for those dudes, but right now it's still around. Yeah, I do for sure, like, stay and I check the metagraph too. Like, if you want to find the right validator, okay, maybe you can go to Tau Yield and get a decent idea. Or maybe you can use the portfolio feature on Tau Stats. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can add wallets to Tau Stats and see the APR that they're getting on all of the validators that are staked to across all their subnets. You don't have to just use your wallet. You can add any wallet. So you go into a subnet that you want to, you know, allocate heavily into. You look at the top holders. You see which validators are owning a significant portion of alpha on that subnet, because this is a key differentiator between validators that can set weights effectively and that have, you know, a powerful, you know, UMA consensus, you know, essentially weight. Through the alpha that they hold, because the stuff on root, you multiply it by 0.18 now. So it's less than 20% of the weight of alpha as far as the mechanism of actually performing as a validator. So you want a validator that has a lot of alpha. So I'll check that too. You gotta go in there because you want to see who's child keyed to one another. And the way that works on Bittensor is you have validators that can essentially ride on the coattails of another. So, and they can do it like, it's like, you know, 3 or 4 steps down. So you'll have like one validator running legitimately, then they're taking, you know, 9%. Then you'll have another validator that's, you know, child keyed to them, and they're taking 0%. Then you got another validator that's child keying to that one that's at 9%. And you could be on the third one, you know, like you could be pretty deep down in the, and you want to be, of course, as close to the top as you can. You want to be on real validators that are doing the work. There's only a couple left. And you want to look at those child key takes and those APRs. The best way to do it right now is a kind of a combination of looking at the top holders to see what they're doing, checking their wallets using the portfolio feature for real APR on Tau Stats, and then making your decision, you know, from there. Then you have to spend the time going into your wallet, maybe not every day, but every couple days, and scan your APRs and make sure that you don't have any outliers. Because if you take a chance on a validator that may not be one of the, you know, doxed validators because you think it has a great APR, it might not be around in 3 days. Like, so you like, there's all kinds of things that if you spend enough time in this stuff, you'll become an expert at. And there is no substitute for experience. I don't use scripts. I have never automated a transaction. Every single buy that I've done, and I've done thousands easily at this point, have been, you know, the old-fashioned way. And it forces you to become very intimately connected with the metagraph, the transaction log, the price charts, the whole thing. And I've been just like a pig in slop over here for the last few weeks, dude. I've just been like rolling in it, loving it. I remember when I got to like 30 or 40% of my portfolio, I'm like, no, like I got to slow down because I don't want it. I don't want this stop. I don't want it to stop. Like I want to just keep swapping forever, you know, but of course you're going to run out of Tau eventually, and everyone does. And not to that point yet, but I certainly have dialed back the rate of swapping at this point, simply because I have so much, of my portfolio already in.
Yeah, when you say you swap old-fashioned way, does that mean CLI?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't use any of the tools. I don't integrate. I don't use the wallet stuff. Of course it works well. I have tested it because I've tested the official wallet, the mobile wallet. I've done the Tau stats thing. But I use the CLI because that's just how I grew up running the Validator. Was always on the command line, and I got pretty comfortable with it. Also, there's so many different things that you can see, and I know they're incorporating this into these different tools, and they're getting better at it. It wasn't very good about a month ago. But when you're using the CLI to make your trades, you can kind of like get a way better sense for what's actually happening when you're swapping Tau to Alpha. And I'll give you a good example. When you are getting, front run by one of the bots out there, and generally I can tell you right now on the bigger subnets like the top 10, they're going to probably leave you alone if you stay under 2 Tau per trade. And if you go in past that and you're in like the top 20, the 10 to 20 range, maybe they'll get you at 2 Tau. So you got to go down to under 1 Tau. Probably they're going to change their strategy after I say this. So whatever, I don't know. We have to fix the bot thing anyway, which is also going to be fixed by either averaging out all of the transactions to the same slippage in a single block, or randomizing the transactions within a block so that you can't front run people anymore. One of those two things is going to, or you can't sandwich anymore. One of those things is going to happen eventually in the near future here. I know that that's already being worked on, but anyway, when you're on the CLI and you're trying to swap into something, you can do like basically a test transaction and see what the slippage is going to be. So if you want to ape into something and put like 50 Tau into it or whatever, and you don't want to go over a certain slippage, you can type in the 50, hit enter, and then it'll show you the slippage for that buy. Then you can go back into your command and adjust your slippage down to that level that you were able to estimate with your buy. And when you type it in exactly, that provides you a protection against being front run. You know what I'm saying? Because if someone comes in before you, but you go in with some massive 5% slippage, even though you're only going to use 0.5%, you might get front run for the same amount of Tau that you're going to spend. So someone will jump in the second before you spend 50 Tau. They'll spend 50 Tau on the subnet. You'll buy your 50 Tau, and then they'll dump their 50 right on your head. And so when you use the CLI and you watch the transaction log and you dip your toe into the subnet with a couple small trades before you make your ape, and you look at the last few minutes to see okay, did anyone come in with a 20, 30, 40 Tau trade that really wanted to get into a subnet? What happened to them? Did they get sandwiched? Did you can see what's been going on, and then that's kind of like your scouting report for what you can expect. Like maybe you have to go in with 20 transactions, half a Tau at a time and look like you're DCAing. You put your DCA disguise on, and then the bot doesn't come after you, but you still get your 10 Tau in over 20 trades. So there's all these things that you eventually learn if you stare at it for long enough and get burnt enough times. And there's ways to get the bots too. And I'm not going to talk about those, but when I have a little extra time and I'm feeling like screwing with them, I also mess with the bots just for fun. I wish there was someone sitting there, because I don't know, I feel like I'm just wasting my time on it or whatever. But it is satisfying to be I got a quarter Tau out of this bot,
Yeah, get them at their own game.
Yeah, but it's a waste of time. I wouldn't suggest anyone spends any time doing it, but I do it for my mental health, to just walk away the winner at least once after they've been, stealing Tau from me now and everybody for 2 months.
And being back in the CLI like that, you must be reminiscing back to when you had a validator. You sold that to Tensora. How did this come about? Tau.com has your validator now. How'd that happen?
Dude, first of all, February of last year, so a year and 2 months ago now, I almost just shut the thing down because I was starting to get burnt out from running it. I was like, is this even doing anything? Does it even matter? The stake was going down a little bit. And that's about the time that I turned on the 9% take and then use that to get Dippy into Bittensor after a few months, and the Validator built up, Validator built up a little bit of tau in its wallet. And then we did something similar with a Wombo subnet that never really went anywhere. But tried to use kind of the Validator for good in that last year. And then in the end, my wife and I had our first kid last year in July, so I ran out of time to run the thing, and I hung on for a couple months before I child hotkeyed to Rizzo, and then I realized, like, there's a couple 100,000 in stakes still on here. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm child hotkeying, which is basically like legal weight copying without taking too much divs for yourself, and like, is it the right way to be shepherding such a large percent of the tau in this ecosystem, into sort of this next phase of Bittensor, which with this 100% child keyed validator? In the end, I had to be honest with myself and just say, like, no. And I almost gave, and I tried actually to give the thing away at the end of the year, but the timing didn't work out with the team that I was working with, and there was a very synchronistic event that occurred around Christmas, where I was introduced to the team from Tau.com and the Tensora guys, and the connection that was made there for me felt right. The timing felt right, and honestly, that's probably why I gave it up more than anything, is that I just had a good on the day I had a good feeling about it. The kind of offer came in, dude. As of now, I think I lost money on the Validator because I'm selling it. And because of the tax situation, like when you take in tax, when you take in income, and I'm in California, you are getting like torched from a tax perspective, not only on the federal side, which everyone has to pay, but state tax wise. And when you sell something at a certain value of, let's say, like you get 1,000 tau for it or whatever, and it's I don't know, Tau's trading at 400, and then Tau drops to 250. Well, now you're break even, or like 200. Now you lost money. So you are at the just like somebody who or any one of us who held Tau throughout those years, or not years, but just last year when we were trading anywhere from 700 to 500. If you weren't pulling out a little bit of Tau each month to cover your tax bill, all of a sudden, if you tried to pay it for whatever reason in Q1 of this year, and you're realizing like, oh, I can only get 200 now. Like, you're going to lose every div that you earned last year because you have to sell every single Tau to pay for that income. Like, and that unfortunately got me on. So the Validator was basically given away, but that's okay, because that's not why that I didn't transfer ownership of the Validator to make money. I transferred ownership of the Validator to Tau.com because I believe in the mission of this enterprise, not only of the the Tensora stuff, but there are and the people that they've brought on, like Paul and Garrett from Open Tensor, that's Swami Nation, and Carrot, who runs Subnet 81. Swami runs the Validator for Tau.com now. So that's why I did it, is the people that are involved, the roadmap for what this enterprise is going to deliver, which I can't even talk about, but it is awesome. And like, I'm putting, I took a position with them as well as chief evangelist. So only in crypto could you be hired as a chief evangelist and it be a legitimate and real and valuable position, but this is what I am. And that's why it happened. And so that's kind of how that relationship was formed. And I think if anyone's going to Endgame here in a couple weeks, you'll get to meet some of the Tau.com team. I will be there as well. The guys from Tensora, Giles and Jack, will be there, I believe, and some of the teams. So you guys can always stop and say hi as well.
And Chief Evangelist, what does this role entail? What does this mean?
Yeah, basically it means communicating the value of the different things that this group is delivering to Bittensor in a way that the community can understand and get behind and hopefully support through not only the validator but also the subnets. So this is essentially a role of walking out in front and banging the drum, blowing the horn, but it's done, and I wouldn't do it any other way, from the most honest and straightforward. This community, I hope at this point knows, I'm not going to try and sell you something or get you involved in something that I don't believe in myself, and that's where I've come at. That's the direction I come at with this relationship and this role. And so I hope to be able to just honestly and forthright communicate the value in an effective way that this group is bringing to Bittensor, and I think it will be very effective.
And you have mentioned the word synchronicities prior. What exactly were the synchronicities that led to Tau.com acquiring the validator?
Yeah, essentially the day that I computed my estimated my tax bill and got the response back from the tax guy was the exact same day that I received the offer for the validator. So that synchronicity was one of them. But it's funny that you bring synchronicities up, because I had a couple that I wanted to share in general with some of the subnets and the community that I think people might be interested in. So
let's get into it. Let's get into it. This is what the people want.
One of the things that I've talked about, and you can go back to the pods from in the beginning of the Bittensor Guru, episodes 1 through 5. There's even a synchronicity episode where I'm talking about turtles and all kinds of other stuff. But one of the things that's been delivering me sort of messages in my life is this number 1221, and it's been following me now for years. And one of the things that I did when I was looking at the subnets that I was kind of deciding, which ones I would be interested in, is I started checking the registration dates. Okay. And if you look at the registration date for Chutes, it's December 21st, 12/21. I knew Chutes was going to be a monster based on that alone. If you check the registration date for Gradients, 11/21. Okay, November 21st. If you check the registration date for Dataverse, Data Universe by Macrocosmos, 12/11. Based on those three things alone, those three individual registration dates, I went very wild on those subnets early on. And two of them have, of course, blown up. Chutes is now, 0.35 today. Gradients, for a while, Gradients was trading at 0.015. It's done a 10x,
Yeah.
So Gradients is blown up. The Dataverse stuff, Subnet 13, hasn't quite exploded yet, but believe me, I'm not saying this to try and get people to go in and don't buy anything based on my synchronicities. I don't care. You don't need to buy anything. These projects are going to be fine whether I have a synchronicity about it or you believe in the 12/21, 12/11, 11/21 stuff or not. But I'm telling you that it has led me down a path of success to this point, and I think there's something to it. Also, if you know the date 12/21, that is the date of the winter solstice. Okay, that's when Chutes was launched. If you go back to 2023 spring equinox, that was, I believe, March 21st. That's the date that Finny, the Finny network, was launched on Bittensor. So you have this stepwise sort of thing happening where Finny comes in, changes the whole landscape of Bittensor, allows us to do the subnet stuff, it's 121 while I'm talking about this right now. You got to be kidding me. Like, and I know people are going to be like, oh, the number, I know it. I can just hear them now. I can see the replies on the Twitter stuff, numerology, blah, blah, blah. Like I can hear it all. Dude, I don't care because it is laid a, yellow brick road down in front of me, and it will for you too. If you find out what your, sort of connection is, and you look at the metagraph long enough, and I promise you, like, I see these messages coming through in the numbers and stuff all day long, and I allocate funds according to these things. And more often than not, in fact, almost every time, it works out. And I'm not, I don't know, some kind of magician here, but if I just have a feeling behind something, I'm just going to follow it, I'll give you one more. This one's huge. And I'm sorry that it involves a specific team, and I wish I had a synchronicity for every team out there, but I'm sorry I don't. If you look at the logo for the Bittensor Guru podcast, okay, it's this monkey. He's got like these specs on, with the little towel thing on his forehead. The guy that made the Bittensor documentary, Everett, made that logo for me, the monkey logo. And I asked him on the book. There's an open book on the sort of the table that the monkey's sitting at, and on that book there is a watermark. And back then, like when I had to make that logo, I was trying to integrate, bring in Constellation. It's a different, cryptocurrency project that's still hanging around. But I was kind of involved in this thing that they had with these door traffic monitors that you put above these retail installations. I'm not doing that anymore because I focus on Bittensor, but back then I was, and I was trying to get them involved. And so I put this watermark on the book. Had Everett put that watermark on there, and Constellation never turned into anything. They never launched a subnet. They still have their own blockchain, but the logo stayed. And I always kind of wondered, like, man, why was I so interested in that thing? Like, is that going to turn into anything? Why did I feel like that was important enough to put on the logo of the podcast? Then, like, I think back in January, I'm looking at the monthly report that Macrocosmos puts out for their ecosystem, and it's like on page like 6 or 7, they're like, the official name of our ecosystem, our 5 subnets, and the subnets we integrate with, Constellation. And I'm like, holy shit, that's the that's the thing that's on the book. That, okay, it's Constellation for a different project, but it's Constellation. It's the name that makes that makes the difference. That was enough for me to believe that I should be heavily allocated into Macrocosmos and also into the subnets that they're integrating with and working with on their projects, which I don't test me completely. I can't remember all of them, but it's at least 57, 52, and 44, and I think 34 were all on that slide, that Constellation slide. So that has worked out very well for me, concentrating on their ecosystem and the other ones that I talked about earlier with the 1221 and 1121 and 1211. And maybe I got lucky on all that, or maybe that's just what it is, man. Maybe these signals are out there, and if you have the, courage and confidence to see these things and believe in them and then put your funds behind them, maybe some good things will happen for you,
How do you become so in tune with receiving these signals? Because you've also, on your podcast, you said Chutes could become 25% admissions, and Rayon Labs has surpassed that. So there is some truth behind some of these things you prophesize almost.
Because I just call it like I see it, and I don't even think about it. It's just the first thing that comes into my head. And if I'm flowing, like if I'm doing an intro to a podcast and I'm talking about Chutes hitting 25, and probably Chutes will hit 25, independent of what Gradients and 19 add on top, I just ride with it, man. Like, honestly, how did I get plugged into that in the beginning? Well, you got to do and I don't do it anymore, but you got to do a lot of psychedelics, or you got to do a lot of meditation, or you just got to be in a mind state where you are sort of plugged into the other side, because there's a whole lot going on that you don't normally see if you're just moving through the world, like an NPC or whatever, or not paying attention to the deeper, or there's no other way to say it, but there is just things going on and whole different side to this reality that is not, available to people that are really just kind of going through the motions. And so if you are able to take the time away from living your monotonous kind of, day-to-day life of just like, doing all the normal things that we all do, if you do take some time for yourself and explore things through whatever methodology that you can find, I believe that you will become more tapped into these signals. And the more you believe in them, the more they help you. And it's pretty wooey to say that, and I went 30 years, dude. I went like almost my whole, 3/4 of my life up to this point. Barely had a single synchronicity, never believed in any of that stuff. Like, just like was straight materialist all day long. And only, in the last few years have I really discovered that other side. Kind of kicked off with a visit to the Great Pyramid, actually, that I did. And then, like I said, exploring a bunch of, mind expanding things. And we all kind of know what those are, I think, at this point. But that's how and then the challenge is just like everything else that you try to incorporate into your life, like a better diet or a better exercise regimen, is to stay plugged into that stuff, and integrate it into the way you are after the initial like woo factor has worn off. Like you could go, to Amsterdam and take some mushrooms or whatever and come back, and then like maybe it changes your life, or maybe you have a great time or have a terrible time and forget about it a week later. But if you can take something away from those experiences and incorporate them into kind of how you see the world and how you interact with things, including the metagraph, telling you, then you will find yourself receiving intuition messages and, guidance from whatever is over there, whether it's your higher self or whether it's your spirit guides or however you choose to interpret what that is. I do believe there is something there for all of us that will kind of help steer you in the right direction.
Are there any, you said 1221 is kind of when you got going right now. How long do you keep, I guess, looking for that into the future? Or is it kind of just like how does this work going into the future with your synchronicities? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, dude. The hardest thing about it is to like not get yourself all wrapped up in the numbers and thinking that like they are the thing that are guiding you, because it's mostly about the feeling that you get when you see the numbers themselves. So like, for example, 1221, okay, it has ones and twos in it. Okay, ones and twos, I think of the, like if there's some study done on like the frequency of different numbers, it's like 40% ones, 30% twos. And, it goes down as you go up to 9 and then starts over again, of course. But like, of course, in Bittensor, like if we're priced in the ones, well, every total subnet price is going to start with 1. So like it's not like you could just like look at the thing and then automatically jump on it based upon, seeing the number and then like scientifically. It's not about like I have calculated there's a certain number of ones and twos in the subnet metagraph for number, 60, and I'm going to now ape in. It's like you're scrolling through and all of a sudden your eye just hits the market cap, and the market cap's, 22.1 or 21 point. And it's like, when you get, and it's the feeling on top of the seeing the thing, because it's not every time you see it that you have to just like start throwing money around. That would be insane. You could go find any subnet right now and find the registration date that ends in a 12 or a 21 because there's 30, and then just think like that's the magic subnet. But it's like I was looking at those 3 subnets before I even saw that. And then when I saw that, I'm like, it's a no-brainer now. Like, you know, and so it's like when it's a confirmation on top of a thought you already have, that's a good way to do it, is like you're having an idea, intuition to look into something, then you see something on top of that that's like a yes or like a confirmed, you know. That's one of the ways to do it, but it's totally driving by feel. You know, it's almost like the when like Luke, you know, puts the eye mask on and he's like fighting the floating bot shooting lasers at him in Star Wars. You know, it's just like, it's kind of like that, except it's just feel. That's the best way to explain it. It's just feel. And you can take it down you can get real crazy with the stuff. You know, you can take some tarot cards out and lay them out for the subnets that you're involved in. And people will think I've lost my mind when I say that, but you can't tell that to my portfolio.
That's a bar. That's a bar right there, Keith. You can't tell that to my portfolio. This actually kind of complements well the trend of vibe coding, in a sense. This is like vibe investing in subnets.
Dude, it is kind of similar to that. And people will vibe code into some of the most amazing projects and like productions of code and just like apps and stuff that you could ever imagine, because if you can somehow you keep just enough of the thinking mind on to keep you oriented in whatever the task is doing, but otherwise you are using whatever you're using, probably with vibe coding. I'm guessing it's a lot of time music or whatever, just to stay in kind of the flow of what you're doing. But I'm sure there's other methods as well. And this is no secret. Like, I've done a bunch of podcasts outside of my own and talking about the connection. I have the book sitting right here somewhere. The connection between Silicon Valley and like psychedelics, for example. The book's called What the Dormouse Said, to reference to Alice in Wonderland. And, the marriage between technology and these, more esoteric things is undeniable. It's consistent. It's been happening for 70 years now, at 60, 70 years at this point. But, anyone will tell you, from Steve Jobs to, Jacob Steves himself. You can go listen to the podcast he did with the professor from, I don't remember what, the one I'm talking about, where he's wearing that sweater.
Yeah.
So like, it's all out there. It's true. It's all real. You can choose to plug into it. You cannot. If you don't plug into it, you can still be a great success. You don't need it, but it's freaking sure nice to have in your back pocket, Yeah,
speaking of great success, did you anticipate Chutes being this level? The success they've had so far. What do you make of that? Why do you think that is? Would you attribute it all to Namare and John Durbin and I forget the third person's name, but I'm sure you know.
Bon Iver maybe is doing a lot of back end work, I think, with them. But even Wandering Weights, who I had on my pod from Gradients, was working on 19 for a long time. So this whole team, what it seems like to me, is they launched 19, which was powering Core Cell, which basically for all of last year was like really the only thing coming out of Bittensor with a real usable front end where you could be prompting, you could do the text stuff, you could do all the image stuff. They created a bunch of apps on there. Mog Machine did a great job of pushing that. And 19 is kind of like where these guys sort of like learned the trade of the incentive mechanisms, and Namare, like, hit some home runs with some of the front end stuff, probably honed his trade there on that. And then when he combined with John, who John had been, mining like half the subnets on Bittensor, and the dude is like wicked smart. You can tell by the way he talks and the demos he shows about it, some of the stuff he shares on his screen and the things and the rate at which he ships things. And when you take people like Namare and John and Wandering Waits and the rest of the team at Rayon, and you eliminate the corporate and the fucking middle management structure and any kind of approval process of like, here's how you got, we gotta A/B test it, we gotta put it through the we gotta make sure the team tests it. Like in Bittensor, it doesn't matter because we trust this team to just ship. So if you ship something and it doesn't work, well, you ship the last 15 things and they all hit a home run. So just like keep taking chances. And speaking of like vibe coding, so when these guys have like something that they want to deliver, and they're taking some more time dropping squad, which is probably good because that's like there's more attention on that launch than anything that Bittensor has ever released other than Dynamic Tau, probably. So they're taking a little bit of time with that, but outside of that, they just continue to ship things with Chutes all the time, and all of the stuff that on the back end that they've built in around the security for the mining side, and they've got the Kubernetes piece in there, and it's like they have incorporated things into the development that has just like used all the best practices for the subnet owner, like spend a bunch of time building the incentive mechanism and learning it all on 19 in the previous year. Get a miner involved in your development. That's John, who has breadth of experience throughout the whole ecosystem. Have a back end guy at I think it's Boniver I don't remember the name of his exact.
It's something like that.
Yeah, and that you trust, that can also just ship at the same rate as Namare, who's shipping all the front end stuff, and then have someone like Mog involved in 19 who can like push the whole message and then diversify into the training side with Wandering on gradients, and you end up with this like trifecta of utility that is delivering exactly what we always wanted with Bittensor. Because the thing that we would say in the early days in the smaller circles that I was in was like, we should be able to launch anything on Hugging Face, and we should be able to train models, and we should be able, like, all the things that was like we should be able to do in a decentralized way. Well, here it is. And speaking of like the prophecy or whatever, like all these things that I joke about things that we talked about with Bittensor, like we could have 100 subnets. What do you mean 8? Like it's all happening. Every single thing almost is happening or is going to happen. And really the only thing left is the price. And that will come because at this point, with the market the way it is, nobody's going to pump anything that doesn't have some very, very high value underneath, because nobody wants to take any risk. And what you're watching with the development of all these subnets, and not just Rayon but everybody else, is the confirmation of undeniable utility and value in Bittensor that is far out surpassing the 250 times 8.2 million or whatever the circulating supply is. Like, the fact that this ecosystem is floating around $2 billion as a market cap is a total joke for what is going on underneath the hood. And I will keep saying that. And when we're at 10 billion, I'll say it. And when we're at 50 billion, I'll say it. And I don't know when it'll change, because as the bigger we get, the bigger fish are going to come in. And you can see the whole thing spinning up now. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah, 50 billion, you'll still be saying that. JJ has said quadrillions. Do you have any vision like that for the ceiling that this thing could become or turn into?
Yeah, because the thing that JJ understands is that artificial intelligence has no ceiling. So, like, then when you take a protocol like Bittensor, that is the fairest thing that exists, not only in crypto at this point, but in artificial intelligence itself, because it allows anybody to invest in it. You don't have to be a VC. You could be anyone. You could be my grandma, and you could own Bittensor. My mom owns Bittensor. she doesn't know anything about AI. She just knows it's going to eat her job and everybody else's. So she wants a piece. And that's the thing. That's what Bittensor allows. Anybody can get in and launch a subnet. The prices aren't even that high anymore, especially considering what, you might have to raise to launch a normal business or whatever. And the ability for this thing to use the trusted tokenomics of Bitcoin, which has now been 15 years out there, and everyone believes in it, obviously, as the number one sort of cryptocurrency. But we can use that to like legitimize our creation of value as well. And the thing that you can't measure is the impact that artificial intelligence is going to have, because it's going to be unmeasurable, sort of, because it's going to start doing things that are not even accounted for in like, GDP and value creation, because it's going to allow for problems to be solved that are simply today unmanageable. And I believe that Bittensor is like a proving ground for that. And you can listen to any one of my podcasts, and I probably talk about it on almost every single one. If you give the power to one of these larger companies like the OpenAIs or Anthropic's maybe a little better, but any of these centralized Google, any of these centralized entities, that is a timeline that this, humanity does not want to be on, because that's way too much power in one entity's hands. And you got to democratize it. You got to split it up. You got to allow anyone to own it. And you got to do it in the fairest way possible. And that's what Bittensor does, especially with dynamic tau and alpha. It's undeniable that this method of allowing access to the development of artificial intelligence to everybody is not only going to be successful, but it appears that it could also just sort of take over the way that technology is designed, distributed, sort of like value is associated with it, because I do believe it's really creating a new paradigm for associating value with technology companies, and specifically with AI.
When do you think we hit that mass adoption point? Or do you think we've already hit it? Because Chutes yesterday, I believe, announced they had 15,000 new active users in a day, like signups in one day.
You're seeing it happen like right before our very eyes, and you need the code-free agent create. You need something that's code-free, that people can drag and drop and do these different these different artificial intelligence sort of like creative operations, but that aren't just prompting with an LLM and prompt engineering and the whole thing, that have a different level of sort of like control and incorporation of different data sets and data flow. And that's what Chutes is going to bring. And I expect that businesses, just like businesses are created around, the APIs for OpenAI and ChatGPT, and you've got entire companies being launched and designed around using these centralized models as a backend. You will have entire companies, subnets, just things that you do in your life with your agents that you create to help you sort of operate in the world. That will now start to happen in a decentralized way on Chutes. That's what I believe, is you're not going to see these, and you're going to see lower prices. You're going to see always uptime, because it's all on the backs of Bittensor. Everyone thinks, it's Chutes. It's just, but underlying all that is Bittensor itself. Like, Chutes is built on the decentralized infrastructure that this ecosystem has been pounding the crap out of for 3 years, making it stronger, making it better. Of course, they themselves on the subnet have had large leaps in how they've used the incentive design and some of the other things we already talked about, but just incorporating these into how Chutes runs has taken this subnet into and just shown everybody what's possible, essentially. And that's why, and how I think we will start to see that mass adoption that you're asking about is we're going to have now the consumer-friendly version of interacting with artificial intelligence on a much deeper level than just prompting.
What would you say to the argument of Bittensor starting to become too dependent on some of these individuals, like John Durbin with Chutes, being basically developing the entire code base they have solo, and then the second biggest I believe right now is like Targon, with Josh being pretty much the primary developer there, and then the third one is Gradients, I think right now, and as far as I know, Wandering Waits is like the primary guy there. So it seems like these big ones, it requires one special individual. What do you make of this?
Would it be better if there was, 10 or 15 Chutes instead of one? Yep, but there's not. So I don't know what to tell you. You can go down the list and you can see what the subnets are generating, and you can jump onto whatever, digital commodity, whether it's serverless compute on Chutes or 19 inference or the 1, 2, 3 click training that's happening on Gradients, or the inference that's happening on Targon, and the stuff that's coming up with the privacy that they're gonna, it's gonna allow them to work with entities that need that extra level of security, or the stuff that's coming out of Macrocosmos with subnets 1, 25, and 13. Or I already talked about it, but the stuff from 404 that you can generate, or the TensorPlex using the kind of the human mind, mining the human mind. And you can go down the list of all these things, but you can't come up with one that has the not only that has the ability to power almost an entire thing like OpenTensor that was already doing fine without it, but it just came in and took the whole thing over, and launches new models like immediately, and now you're getting this bleed over from open router users that are coming over just to use Chutes specifically because it's one layer up in the stack. Why would you use the second thing? You have an API on Chutes anyway for all the models. So I do not think that Chutes will be the only subnet to ever trade at this value. It's just the first one. There has to be a first one. It can't just be this is why we got off the old train of, and I was part of the problem with this stuff, but when I'm allocating value to subnets, can I give 30% as a validator to one subnet? No, I don't think so. Okay, I can give them 10. Then I give the next one 8. And then the next one, then they give 4 or 5, 7, and that's what it was. If you go look at the thing, and you can go look at it for Bittensor Guru, or you can look at it for the whole ecosystem, because it wasn't just me that was doing it, but you very rarely had any subnets getting above I don't know, 10, 12% or something. Mostly it was distributed. And that was good, because during that time we were incubating 64, little, baby technology projects. And some of them grew up into being a T-Rex that's going to eat the rest of or maybe not eat the rest of them, maybe invite the rest in, or something. But, a couple of them exploded based on that incubation process, and about 50 of them didn't. And about 10 of them look pretty good, but we don't really know, are they going to go the distance? Are they going to create the value? Are they going to continue to ship at the rate that this tiny? That's the thing. How many people are in the people are in the Rayon Labs team? I don't know what it is. It's less than 10, probably. Sounds like it might be less than 8.
They keep their circle tight.
Right. Okay. You don't even need that many people. I know Macrocosmos, they have more subnets, but they're at 31, 33, whatever it is. And then you have some other teams that I see we have 10 people. It's what the hell's everyone doing? So if this team's shipping with 8, and yes, okay, you got some unicorns in that 8 that are delivering very high value, especially to Chutes. Sorry, that's what they are. They are that team. So if someone else becomes that team, the community. This is the other thing. One more thing on this. when Chutes launched, Chutes had a percentage of emissions that I remember when I did the podcast with them. It might have been under 2, but it was for sure under 3. Because when I turned them up after that podcast to like 6%, I was like way outlier. And so it was not immediately obvious, and there was no secret agreement between all the big players in Bittensor that we're going to pump up Chutes. Didn't happen. It wasn't there. In fact, in the beginning, it didn't go anywhere very quickly. And then when dynamic tau comes and you let the market decide, and the market decided that this is the one that we're going to put out into the world as here's what Bittensor can do. And they decided to trust Namaré and John Durbin and the whole team at Rayon Labs. And that's why we're in this position. So for anyone that's like confused about stuff, I don't think those guys even buy their own subnet token. I could be wrong about that, but from what I don't look at it as much now, but I looked at it very closely early on, there are some subnets that I will not name because I'm a nice guy that buy a lot of their own token, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can try and use your tau to game the system as best you can if that's your angle, but that's not, I don't believe that's the angle that those guys took. I know they didn't do it with gradients because I was so watching gradients so closely from day one. I am 100% sure that that is a clean launch. Chutes is harder because it jumped up so quick. It was harder to tell what was happening with that one. But that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, it almost seems like we're cutting a Chutes promo video here. I don't have any ties to Chutes. I assume you don't either as well.
Like I said, I hold 25 subnets. I don't get anything if they blow up or not. Like, what are we going to do? This is the thing that we've decided that we're going to tie the it's not the future of Bittensor. It's simply the biggest swing that we're taking at the earliest stage with the market deciding where they want to put their tau, and those guys are attempting with squads to kind of deliver that value, and we don't, that's how I look at it. I don't think that it's I don't think it's anything to worry about, honestly. Once, one of these other subnets like Templar gets a foundation model that comes out of Bittensor or something, Templar is going to go to the moon too. So it doesn't, there's routes for all of these different projects to deliver on sort of like the best case scenario for their subnet. And I can see where some of them are aiming and moving towards it. Simply that this one is moving faster and sort of better than the herd at this point, Yeah,
it's the current landscape of things. Chutes is the number one. Is what the price has set.
Yeah.
And the market has determined currently.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on something with teams that bought their own subnet token early.
Yeah.
How have you seen that play out? Is it not good every time, or is it like, because people are calling for buyback programs for these subnets similar to how stocks run it, how they run massive multi-billion-dollar buyback programs like Apple. It's like a very common thing in traditional finance.
Well, the thing about the whole buyback thing is, and really about buying your own token, is we happen to be involved in cryptocurrency here where there is an emission schedule. And so it's not like, the real world where a company might be doing buybacks with additional funds coming from investors. But mostly what a company's doing buybacks with is revenue. As far as I understand buybacks, someone's probably like, you idiot. No, I don't know. But like, it's not like you have to use revenue because these guys can have stacks of tau that they've been sitting on and growing for years on, before we launch dynamic tau, for example, or maybe they do have a big backer who has a bunch of tau and they want to try and game the subnet mechanisms or the emissions mechanisms by pumping up their subnet. Okay, go ahead. The thing is like the market will pump around you. That is what I'm seeing, and you will still probably be able to maintain your price and a decent level of emissions, and maybe it's going to work out for you in the long run. Like I don't care enough to sit down and do the math on how many, thousands or tens of thousands of tokens must go in to maintain a price of XYZ until the root network gets down to whatever 30%, and then you buy more and you try to just chip away at the ecosystem. But what nobody thought was going to happen, including the teams that were buying their own subnet tokens, was the entire move now into this close to the 2 range. And what that's done is that even if you've been able to maintain your price and you believe in your subnet and you're pumping it up with your own token, everything around you is also increasing in value. So that whole exercise has become much more difficult and resulted in a lower percentage of emissions, as you're seeing sort of the market dynamics play out in a healthy way. And people look at this stuff very closely. Believe me, that the larger teams that have a lot of tau, they are looking very closely at the holder base, where the tau is coming from. I promise you, they know this stuff. And when that money starts coming into to Alpha, they're not going to be supporting those subnets either, if you ask me. So I don't necessarily think you need buybacks. I think you can live and die by the strength of your digital intelligence commodity. And if you can't, then you're probably going to have an uphill battle maintaining any price or maintaining any level of reasonable emissions, no matter how much tau you have. Because as this thing just continues to develop, it appears that the market will continue to raise the total subnet price further, diluting the ability of teams to do that. So I'm pleased to see that happen.
The big teams do watch those wallets, like you're saying. I know for a fact that they'll track them.
Why wouldn't you want to know who's involved in your subnet as well? Like this is actually somebody who owns a significant part of your business. If someone's got 5% or 10% of your subnet token, like you should probably know who that person is. If someone owns 10% of Microsoft or Google or one of these companies, like, do we know who that person is? Yeah. Does Microsoft? Yeah. Like, obviously there's voting and everything else with stocks, but you vote with your tau here in Alpha, right? So are you in bed with somebody who's been holding their tau? If you go back and look at their wallets, for example, that like the tau is coming from, and people obfuscate this stuff by moving it into an exchange and take it out. Some people don't. But generally, if people aren't cleaning up their tracks, effectively, you can actually see, like, has this person been holding tau like over the last 2 years and just not selling? And like, what do you think they're going to do with your subnet token? They're going to do the same thing. They already went up to 700, back down to 200, back up to 250, back up to whatever we're going to go to. And they've held the whole time. That's what they're going to do with the subnet token. So you can start to get a very good idea of like prognosticating who's going to flip in and out of your subnet. And I'm sure there are teams, because their livelihood is based on it, who are very dialed into that.
What have you made of some of the flare-ups publicly since DTAL, where some of these top subnets will have a little Twitter clash, a little X clash every once in a while, or be in each other's discords? What do you make of those?
I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy competition, as long as it doesn't get into the, name calling and get nasty. I think that in general, it pushes each team to perform at a level that is then, untouchable or insurmountable by any kind of critique from the other side. So it will force teams, because they know that others are looking at what they're delivering. You're seeing different teams test out the, kind of the back end of the other subnets and then report on them or whatever. That's all well and good. Like we want that stuff out in the open, because a lot of times, unfortunately, the average investor isn't necessarily capable of looking, including myself, in a deep way at the incentive mechanism, for example, or some of the technical things going on in the background. And you might even need another subnet owner to look at another subnet and be like, something's wrong with this because we had this problem on ours or whatever, I think it's healthy. And in general, our personalities that are involved in this project know each other, been around each other for long enough now that even though it does flare up sometimes into more of like I hate to say this, but I'm cool with all that. I think it's fine. And that's just normal stuff that you see as people compete to, gain market share.
And as someone that people would have considered as part of the cabal of the old guard of BitTensor pre-detail, what's the current state of the cabal looking like?
The Cabal. I don't even know what the Cabal is. I have never been. I could tell you that I have been like approached many times to try and like back when I had an ability to do this and mess with emissions. Like Subnets would come to me like, "Hey, give us this, we'll kick you back that." I'm like, sorry, dude, can't help you. So like, I'm sure there were teams that were like, I'm sure that stuff happened, but the market will take care of it because the price is so low actually that we're seeing so many, I think, new entrance into this stuff, and we're going to see probably a lot of Tau changing hands at this 200 level, and coming into the alpha game. And I can also tell you that the Cabal, whatever it was or whatever it is, if there even is one, I don't even believe in it anymore, because if the Cabal knew what was up, they would have came in and got so deep into alpha tokens early on that they would own the whole thing. And I've been watching everything from day one. I can tell you that that didn't happen. So like, go look at the list of wallets, for example, that are on the backprop leaderboard. You're not going to see like a bunch of related things like, pumping each other up. That's not what I see at all. I see a lot of, there's some weird stuff, but mostly I see the most successful wallets are like organic players that I'm watching buying, swapping in and out of alpha, just like any one of us. And so I don't think there is any kind of conspiracy anymore, because otherwise I would have thought I would have seen it do something bigger than not be a blip on my radar,
In other words, the market's more powerful than the cabal.
And dude, it better be, or this whole thing is done, and so like it has to be. It has to be. And there probably is some cabal crap going on at the individual subnet level. But since you can't, rely on a validator to do anything special for you anymore, I think most of that stuff died when we went to detail.
Yeah, detail put everything on the subnets. Now the
Yeah, it's
subnet
beautiful.
has to worry about fixing
great.
stuff.
And when you see stuff like, subnets that launch cool stuff, and it happens almost every day, there's another subnet that pumps because it is every day if you look. The subnet, tweets about something or posts a video or does an update to their code base or whatever, or has a new partnership. You're seeing all of this stuff like organically create interest in these different projects, and that's exactly what we wanted to see, is that this like thing would take off in a way that was going to carry us into the future of hundreds and eventually thousands of subnets.
Would it be fair to say detail has exceeded your expectations in terms of the momentum it was able to create with these subnets and the level of production, the increase from pre-detail to post?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit to be determined. Right now, it looks very good at the top level of the top 15 subnets or something. I think what you're saying has definitely happened. What I'm hoping is that we'll see is some of those subnets that are in the middle half, the middle 40, let's say, from like 20 to 60. I want to see some of those subnets, maybe when there's a pump in the price of Tau or something, and they can use the emissions that they have to kind of create some more value. I'd like to see some more of those like break out above the 0.01 level before I would really call it a huge success. Although like there's different thoughts on this. Some people think the 80-20 rule is a success. Like 80% should be going to only 20% of the subnets, which is right now, 17 or 18 subnets. And that's, I'm sure, happening. It was happening early on. It's probably even more now. And that we need to kill off the rest. But the thing is, the rest aren't really dead. They're just kind of like lying dormant, and they need to watch very closely what's being deployed successfully in the top 15 and generating interest, so that they can understand the community here and what everybody wants to see, and that they're incentivizing by swapping to alpha. That's what I would do if I was a subnet owner in that range, is sort of like get use what's being use what's happening now to gauge how your development needs to go in order to generate interest in your digital commodity, and maybe you need to pivot, or maybe you need to do some rewrites or whatever, you know.
Yeah, well, Keith, it's been a great hour and a half. You tweeted about coming on here. I thought you had a great idea of a speed run through the top subnets. How you feel about pulling up, good old Talstat, your favorite, and just having a quick look around?
I will.
So we can bookmark this date in history.
Do we need to? Do we? I'm not going to mention. I will do a subnet run through. I'm not really going to say like which ones I own or not, but I will say
no, nothing like that.
Okay.
Nothing like that. Just so we see how the guru operates around the metagraph.
Okay, for sure. Okay, do I want to share my screen here then?
Yeah, it's probably just easiest. Just share the screen, go to like the subnet list on Talstats, do the top 100 or something.
Yeah.
And then just quick look around, see if the sum's still above 2.
Sure. Okay. Let's see.
And what have you thought of those, like the pre-launch subnets almost, where it's like they haven't called the start function yet, and they'll be at like 800 tal to 1 alpha?
All that crap's just noise. You know what I would say about those new subnets is, for the average person, unless you have the ability to set up a bot or something that can snipe these things when they drop to a certain level, it's almost impossible during the first like week, maybe even 2 weeks. 2 weeks for sure if we have the 2-week waiting period before emissions start. But you might even have to stay out of there for like 3 weeks. Because as a human being, you simply cannot move fast enough to catch the value on these dips. So what I would suggest is, if you have an interest in a subnet, use artificial intelligence, use one of the bots that have been posted within the community and modify that to generate some code for yourself, so that you yourself can set something up and basically have buys that come in when a certain price is reached, and just try to add a little bit of tau at a time. I have been successful, and I've only done it for one subnet that I was interested in, but taking the time to watch the price, and I was going in manually without a bot, did definitely pay off if you can snipe those like ups and downs as people trade in and out of the very small amount of alpha that's sitting in those new subnets. So that's my advice for that. Otherwise, just if you're a normal dude, just stay away.
So talk me through what you see here. You open up Talstats. What do you see? What does the guru look at?
Okay, I look at the subnet value in the upper left. Mainly, I just look at the this number here. I don't look at the root or the alpha percentage. Of course, you can look at that. Fine. I don't do it. Tau market cap, I don't look at. Total value or total volume, I don't look at. It's nice to see, but I'd never even look at those things. As I'm going in, the first thing I'm checking is the price, and I want to get a sense on the 1 hour and the 24 hour for what's been happening basically with the ecosystem in general. So the top 10 is a great way to start with that. That's what we're looking at here. We'll change it to 100 rows so we can scroll through all the subnets at one time. Obviously, we know, like, just from being involved in this in dynamic tau now, that we're running pretty hot at 203. Obviously, you can look at the weeklies here and see that you've got above 50% on a lot of the top subnets, and the ones that aren't pumping hard are mostly treading water or just like slightly down. So that's kind of like, it's like taking your pulse or something when you first jump in and you haven't looked at it for a few hours, but you want to see what's going on. The next thing that you want to check is, and actually this little chart over here, sometimes you don't really notice it, but it's kind of useful because there is quite a bit of information lost between 24 hours and the 1 hour. You know what I'm saying? So you can be up, up 25% in the last 24 hours. You got down here 0.52 in the last hour for Chutes. But if you take a look at Chutes is actually not down really in the last hour. I mean, maybe in the last, like, it's actually been pumping pretty hard. You know what I'm saying? Over the last like 6 hours, 8 hours. So that's where I tend to like gravitate towards, is when I'm interested in looking at something and I see a subnet that I want to allocate to. I check this first, see how hot it is on the daily, see where it's been pumping on the week. Today, and over the last 2 days, almost everything worth swapping into is going up. So you're having to make some tough decisions as to where you think this thing is going to go. And that's the fun part. But that's initially what I look at. We've talked a lot about Chutes. We don't need to talk about it anymore. It's trading above 0.4. Yeehaw. Okay. Targon, like we know, we've all seen the video, I think, at this point of Targon's new office, the DEAI down there in Austin. We've got Rob at the helm. You already talked about, it's James, I think, it's doing a lot of the coding
James,
there.
Josh, Ahmed.
Yeah.
Great team down there.
Yeah, so Targon is like not going anywhere, and my initial thought on Targon, and I do think that's a great team, is that the more that we see Chutes and these other prices fly up, I do expect to see Targon making some moves, simply because I see them putting a lot of resources into a single subnet. You know what I'm saying? And if you look at some of the other teams, sometimes they have multiple subnets, the top teams. These guys have one baby, and it's like if you got an only child, that only child's going to get spoiled, And so this subnet is going to get the full attention of this team. And I don't think that they're planning on failing, and I really wouldn't bet against them. That being said, they're sort of in the same, vertical as maybe in 19. There's this little spat between like these inference subnets, and Targon has some unique things that they're offering. So I think that's pretty solid play. And obviously the price has not been pumping. Look at the weekly, right? It's not up very much compared to the rest of the top 10. Maybe there's some value there. So if I was interested in Targon, like I'd put a little star on that as like, okay, it's pretty quiet the last week, probably something there. Gradients has been like the monster that came, you thought
Open
it was
up that chart. Let people see that chart,
dude. You thought this thing was high at 0.04.
Zoom it out too, because you can't even get the full picture here.
Like you did basically you thought down here it was high. I did, at least, because it was down here in the 0.015 range. So it's done a 10-12x at this point. You saw this pullback actually, because what you had here is when we did this pump, it went up to like 0.03, but it went right back down. So like this was the surprise for me. We'll get this blue thing out of here. But we're at 0.016. We going up to 0.013, and it's like back down here to the 0.015 range. And I don't know when the podcast came out. Probably right here. No, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But the podcast is not the reason why this thing's pumping. The reason this thing's pumping is because this is you can listen to the podcast about it, but this is a groundbreaking way of customizing models, and it will be the future of how you make a model your own, is this type of methodology. I firmly believe that, and it looks like many other people believe it too. So when's it going to stop? I don't know. You thought it was high here. You thought it was high here. You thought it was high at 10 or 12, and now it's at 17. So maybe it's not going to stop, because this goes back to the conversation that we had earlier about how people look at this thing. And how people look at Bittensor and the market cap and the FDV and the whole thing. It's like people want ownership of these entities that are creating one of a kind, decentralized intelligence commodities, and they're willing to pay for them at the valuation that they believe that project would get out on the street or in, VC land or on whatever it's called, Angels List, or I don't know, so like people are willing to pay for it. Obviously, what a monster. That's the biggest mover of anything in, anything
so far. That's probably been the highest percent return from bottom to top.
Yeah. Templar. So like Templar's, Const loves Templar. He even said that he, Jacob Steves, Bittensor co-founder, contributed, I believe, to their incentive mechanism. They were on novelty search. That team has created something. They've got a very nice loss curve that I think that they've been trotting out there the last couple days on X. That team it appears to be capable, if you believe in the price, of delivering a foundational model, like a competitive model with the largest, whether it's a DeepSeek or Llama or whatever, apparently this thing is capable of getting there. I don't know enough to know that, but when the market believes it, I hesitate to say no. So I would not count anything out, because this is another one up 50% in the last week. Like, that's pretty unbelievable, because what they're doing is extremely difficult, and the competition that they're up against is the highest in the artificial intelligence space and has the most resources. But this is also the subnet that if we actually as a community and as a project did pull it off, then it puts Bittensor in a totally different category than if we're a project that doesn't generate one of these models. You know what I'm saying? So that's long shot, but I don't know. I mean, the market's going to do what the market's going to do, and people believe in it.
And that's another one of the subnets where it's primarily one guy at the helm.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I have best of luck. PTN, they've been trading around this 12 mark for a while. I'm not going to say anything about them. They got something coming out, glitch, financial beta, something. So it allows you to get value from the miners who are doing the predictive trading stuff, and maybe do some copy trading. And hopefully they're successful with that. If when we see 7% of Bittensor emissions going to a single, financial prediction subnet, unless it's actually printing money for the community, I have a hard time understanding why it's at that value. 19 has seen a huge move over the last day, like up 40%. This thing was stuck basically between like 4 and 5 for a long time, crept up into the 5s for a little bit, and then just blew up as part of the whole just obsession with Rayon, and blew up into the 10 range, and we'll see if it holds it. I'm not sure. It's essentially super fast, inference. It's like enterprise level inference from the team at Rayon. I can't say that much about Nova. I didn't get to the novelty search from yesterday, but obviously the market did. So, drug discovery, the team is pretty highly rated. The incentive mechanism and the subnet itself seems to be developing, from what I can tell, at a pretty high rate. These guys are shipping, and that's why the price continues to go up. They jumped up into like the 6 range and then bled a little bit down into like the 3s or 4s for a week or two before making this jump back up. You can see that, I'm sure, on the chart. Yeah, right here where they got up to like the 7-6 range and then fell down a little bit. Even here they were up in the 6s and then dropped all the way down to the 4s. But it appears that this team is going nowhere, and that the market's pretty interested in it.
And then the next one after that, Celium, run by Fish. What are your thoughts there?
Celium and Fish are entering a very crowded space. There's 1,100, maybe not 1,000, but there's easily 100 different sites where you can go rent compute. I don't know if we need, a compute rental on Bittensor, but if we do have compute rental, Celium will probably be the go-to platform for it. It's more of a question of, do you think that's a good spot for us to be, allocating 4% emissions to, or if you think it's trading at a good price, or if you like, Fish behind it, who has a very long and storied, history in this project. So that's how I look at that one. It's more of a play of like, do you believe in that type of thing on Bittensor? Apex is the top subnet from Macrocosmos. It's basically the agent play. It's actually the only the most popular agent play anyway, outside of what Chutes is building. The agents on Apex, there's actually 1,000 UIDs running as miners versus the normal, or 1024 versus 256, and they're like grandfathered into this thing. That'll probably get opened up, but for now, they present sort of a unique opportunity, and also that is designed by Stefan Crux, former CTO of OpenTensor, and if you bet against that guy, you got problems. So I would not bet against what he is spending his time building, and I think that as the top subnet from one of the top teams, that has some legs. Bitmind is kind of a community favorite. This is the detection of artificial intelligence on either images or video or whatever. Bitmind has had trouble recovering after someone dumped like 4,000 tau worth, I think, maybe like 2-3 weeks ago. You can check it on the chart.
Yeah, in one clip.
Yeah, which they did have a nice jump here. But if you go back, there was one big dump, and that sent them down. Now they're up about 20% from that, and they're moving nicely, moving nicely with this latest pump. But we'll see if they can recover fully. My question that I have is like, who did that? Was it a miner that was saving up from the beginning? Was it I didn't look into it that closely, but I would be interested if I was allocating into this subnet as to how that wallet got so much alpha and why it dumped, and if it's going to do it again. That's what I would be worried about. But otherwise, it has a pretty unique offering as far as what it's bringing to Bittensor. There's one other subnet that's doing something like it, but they're doing it from a text perspective and not the visual stuff. Data Universe has from Macrocosmos has a lot of development and eyes on it or hands on it as well from that team of 30 plus over there. They've also got some of the best stuff to use, like as far as if you're just going to take any of these subnets for a spin right now, you can look up all of your own tweets or anybody's tweets and visualize them. And so it's just a fun thing to play with. It also has some horsepower under the hood that you can use for some more powerful like data scraping needs and social media scraping stuff. I expect that to do pretty well. 404 Gen has been like flying the last week or two. I thought this thing was high at 20 when it was sitting there for a while. But it's all more than doubled that. It's a really fun website. If you haven't checked it out, I think it's 404.xyz or 404gen.xyz.
Yeah, it's something like that. I know you can get to it easily through their X account, but it does good 3D models if you want to. I don't know if I guess we could just demo it at this point.
Well, yeah, we're not going to demo their stuff, I guess. But the thing is that it's got I noticed the holder base for this was pretty different. So when I looked at the holders for this and I checked out the kind of the top validators that they're allocated to, there's a lot of TensorPlex. There's some Crucible in there. When I initially saw this one, there's more Crucible. I saw some validators that I don't typically see in the top 10. So that for me is a signal that there's some either different holders on this one or kind of a little bit of a different crowd in this subnet. And it's doing pretty well.
How much weight do you put on the subnet owner being the top holder of the subnet?
Unless there's been a huge effort for that owner or for someone else other than the owner to acquire a significant portion of the subnet, almost every subnet owner is the top holder. Some of them have it split between two keys, but that's just what you think because you look at the top holder list. But obviously people have multiple wallets. There could be distribution spread out pretty wide. I have no problem with subnets selling some alpha in order to fund their operations, especially if they're going to be spending that money well. And if you buy into the subnet, you're buying into a team that you believe spends money well. Otherwise, why are you buying into the subnet? So like if they're going to use a little bit of the alpha to do that or some of the alpha to do that, I have no problem with it. But you definitely don't want to see them dumping themselves like outside of the top 5 or whatever. That's like not the point of the subnet, in my opinion. You'll probably have somebody launch a subnet that goes wild, like just dumping all the time with some kind of novel mechanism. I don't know. But right now, for me, that's, of course, a key kind of thing to look at as well. But everyone's pretty much in that category. So, yeah, it's hard to use it as a differentiator. Yeah, Dojo is pretty cool. Dojo is we already kind of talked about it, but that's the TensorPlex subnet. That's a really unique one because from the beginning, there's been different subnets in Bittensor that have tried to incorporate human feedback sort of into their model, and Dojo isn't just incorporating it; it is human feedback that's driving the model. Yeah, really unique play from one of the top mining teams in Bittensor. They kind of owned the early training subnets. TensorPlex was always one of the top teams as far as emissions were concerned. So I think they'll
Subnet 9 back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't
and I think
publicly claim that, but
Right. And I think they'll do very well now running their own subnet. Hippias is our storage play here with, I think it's got kind of like a utility side chain associated
What do
with
you
it.
think of that? That was a point of contention
Yeah,
recently.
nobody likes to see, subnets with other chains that are potentially absorbing value that could be flowing into the alpha token. I think that is the purest model of using the alpha token as the home for the value for your project rather than having a secondary chain is preferred. If you have a need for it based upon some very unique thing, and maybe storage is that, then I can see where that would be a thing. But as far as as far as it being like a cool new feature, I'm more of like, oh, that's different. Let's watch that closely to see how that plays out,
So it's more so just seeing how it plays out. It's too early to make a call on it.
For me, yeah. I mean, and they've only been around for a month or a month and a half or something at this point, so they're kind of a newer subnet. But they're one of the newest subnets that has now, them and Nova are essentially the only two in the top 20 patrol knocking on the door here down at 21. They're the two new subnets that have cracked the top 20. Folding is actually mainframe, so I don't know, they just haven't updated the name yet. I expect this to get some more action just because it's like the DeSci, decentralized science play for Bittensor at the moment outside of Nova. So a very unique offering there. Score, everyone I talk to likes the guy that runs Score. So that's I think they're getting a lot of attention because he is just a person that has a good reputation in the community. I think this one is actually it might be the highest subnet that is accelerated by Yuma.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah.
Now that you bring that up, I can't think of one above that's Yuma.
Yeah. Graphite is weird. Graphite, I don't really pay much attention to it, mostly because of this weirdness. They've been, I think, buying their own token at the highest rate of anybody. They essentially own the entire thing. As far as I can tell, you got to get outside the first 10 to even see any. Like, of course, this doesn't mean that these are their wallets.
That could also be people staking to them, right?
Yeah, but if you look at the individual wallets, and I clicked through a few of them the other day, see how they're all graphite? So it's, it could be everyone that buys graphite stakes only to graphite from their individual wallet, but that's unlikely. Now, these guys delivering state-of-the-art graph solutions, either they're playing the emissions game or they believe so hard and deep into what they're building, and I don't know which one it is, and I haven't found out yet. But this team does, and just from running my Validator, this team ships very frequently on their subnet, delivers a lot of updates. So my initial thing would be to say, like, man, they might be creating something really valuable. They're just the only ones that know it, but the market hasn't seen any penetration for their subnet into the top 10.
How much do you take that into consideration? The rate at which they ship. Do you like seeing teams that, boom, like 10 commits every single day? Or it's like, do you like seeing repos that are like more stable with one commit a week or something?
I like to go into the Discord. The Discord is where rather than just the pure commits, I like to go to the Discord and see the activity and the announcements and the changes and the tweaking. And I just like to see movement there. It doesn't necessarily have to be big changes or features. It just has to be continual adjustments, because if you're in this stuff every day, I imagine there's a lot of things you want to change all the time. And I could see, if I owned a subnet, that weekly would be a reasonable amount to be, updating something small or at least interacting with your community. When I go into a Discord and I haven't seen anything for 3 weeks, or like there's an unanswered question in there, I'm like, is this team even alive?
So that's the red flag, is activity with their community.
Yeah, for sure. And the mining community, activity with their mining community. And a lot of these guys talk to their miners outside of the main Discord channel. So just because there's not main chat there doesn't mean it's dead, but it is definitely a red flag, that something's up. Yeah, that pretty much takes us to the top 20. And we could go into the ones after this, but I think that's a pretty good that's a pretty
Yeah,
good
no,
review.
that's a great overview. People got to see the metagraph action. People got to see how you interact with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me give one. I'll just give one. Let's just try 19 here just for shits. We're going to take a look at the transaction log just so I can kind of give you a sense for what I try to look for when I'm thinking about trading into a subnet. And I mean, like, I'm sitting down ready to do it. What's happening? Do we got any copier? Or, I mean, not copiers, but do we have any bots in here doing any damage or people DCAing into it? So what I'm looking for here is this is your time on the left. So how long ago trades were made? You know, what happened? The amount of alpha flowing around. You're getting just a little bit of sell-offs, but the tau that's moving isn't very high. When you see these, looks like there's nobody DCAing into the subnet at this point, and you can tell that. If you go to the top 100, you're looking for a consistent, here's a bunch of miners dumping. You can tell because it's different hotkeys and the same cold key. So that's a miner that's doing a little sell-off. And what you're kind of looking for is if you wanted to make a bigger buy, I'm not seeing one here. Here's one, a buy of 19. Oh yeah, here you go. So here's here's a sandwich, right? You've got this is what you call a sandwich. You've got a 15 tau buy from this 5DT key that came in just ahead of this 19 tau buy by this legitimate wallet. And how do I know that? Well, if you check this one, I guarantee this wallet looks funky. Yeah, okay. It holds nothing, just 29 tau. The transactions that it's dealing with here are buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. That means it's a sandwich bot. So that's what this bot does with its 29 tau. Apparently it's losing. Either that or it's cashing out.
Yeah, it's probably transferring away from that cold key.
Yeah, exactly. And so what happened here is, this buy, where'd it go for 19 tau, a little lower, I guess. Yeah, the buy for 19 tau came in. What price? The price this guy should have got was 0.0 or 0.1033. Instead, he got 0.1035, and then the bot sold on top of him for a gain of 0.02 tau. Okay, not very 0.025 tau. Not very much, but if you take 0.025 and you multiply it by 500, all of a sudden you've had a nice day. So that's what these bots are doing. This is what you want to look out for. If you come into this subnet and you try to ape, a buy of around 19, you can expect the same thing to happen to you. Here's it happening again on a 5 tau buy. You got a 5 tau front run here from our 5CX. This guy's all over the place. I see him, the bot. And then you have a 5.5. So if you even go down to 5.5, you're still going to get sandwiched. Now here's one. You go down to 2. This looks like a legitimate buy. Here's a 5 from the same wallet that made the buy at 2, right? And are we seeing a sandwich on this one? Looks like no. So looks like on this subnet, if you get in increments under 2, the bots might leave you alone, at least today. And so that's kind of one of the things I wanted to call out. And there's also different things you'll see on here, and hard to find an example. You'll see guys you'll see zeros coming in. Maybe we can find one. But you'll see bots that are specific. There's none on 19 in the top 100. When you see a 0 and a trade come in, but it's showing someone tried to buy something, but it comes in with 0 tau, you should look at the transactions around it because that means it was probably blocked. And by blocked, I mean a big buy came in, prevented that buy from happening. That buyer used slippage, so they protect themselves from getting sandwiched. But they still got in. The transaction log will still show the buy. You'll see the buy from the bot. Then you might even see 2 or 3 in a row. And so if you're blind, not looking at the transaction log, and you're doing a couple buys, and you get blocked a few times, and you're like, what's wrong? Is my slippage wrong? Like, you just think it's something wrong with whatever you're using to buy the tau. And you raise your slippage or whatever, they'll let you in eventually, after they've blocked you 4 or 5 times while accumulating subnet token. And then when you buy, then they dump. So there's like different things you got to watch out for if you're really doing this at
And
a
this
high.
is because someone front ran the transaction. So it
Yeah,
raises their price.
exactly. Yep. Yeah. And like I said, I don't want to talk too much about that, I guess, necessarily, because there are solutions coming for it. But at the moment, if you're getting in, you got to watch out for some of this stuff. Some of these subnets have it more than others. I don't know why, you know?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably not a problem that will persist for long because OTF and I guess the leadership seems to be not concerned about like traders in a sense. It's more about investors.
They have a solution for it. I think they're just deciding which one to implement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They think about everything. They always think about everything. Do
Yep.
you ever get into the metagraph and look at like distribution curves or anything like that?
Well, I do check the metagraph, and mostly what I'm checking when I go in now, I very rarely check out the health of the mining, because what I rely on is that when I check the legitimacy of the intelligence commodity by trying to use the actual platform, I'm not sure if I even care if subnet owners are mining their own subnet. I know they are, most of them.
You just care if the product works. You don't care
Yeah,
what the
like,
distribution
does it work? Is it delivering value? Of course, I would prefer if a subnet has a healthy mining community, and you can check down here. The registration cost for 19 is 0.91. Recycled per day is 21 tau. That means there's approximately 22, 23 attempts per day coming in trying to become a miner on 19. You know what I'm saying? That seems pretty healthy to me. That's nice. I can bring you subnets that'll show recycled per day at 0. And that's not so nice. That means that there's some kind of problem with the, using Bittensor to create competition on the mining side. And either a Cabal individually on the mining on a single subnet has moved in and is preventing others from even trying to get in. They've tried essentially and gave up. That's usually, I think, what it is. Or there's some other problem with bringing new miners in. But this, to me, initially looks pretty healthy. So that's kind of what you're looking for. Once I see that, I don't really need to check very much. I mean, you can check the miner weights, or not the miner weights, the distribution curve on this, and you're going to see a lot of this type of S-curve stuff on the healthier subnets. And 19, of course, is going to be one of those. So this one looks pretty good. On the metagraph, the thing that you're looking for when you're kicking tires on validators is you probably don't need to know too much about vtrust, other than you want to have one of the top vtrusts, and if you don't, you're going to be suffering from a APR perspective. Now, some subnets vary pretty good on what the vtrust is. This one appears to be pretty static. But what you're looking for here is when you stake to a certain validator, you want to check out the take, Like, that if you stake to OpenTensor, okay, and you just stake to them right now with your wallet on any subnet, you pay 18%. How do you know that? You can click on them and see validator return and see that they earn 123 tau today or per day from their 18% take. And when you go back to this screen, this is the metagraph then. Whoop. This is the metagraph for 19, and you take a look at OpenTensor. OpenTensor is only taking a 6% take from the validators that use it to validate, okay? So this is the child key, these are the parent keys, but these validators down here, like this Firepool validator with 42,000 tau on root, is putting their weight behind OpenTensor and paying 6% for that. They're also charging you, if you are on Firepool, let's see what they're charging.
And that's significant because you're essentially getting double taxed there.
Exactly. So Firepool themselves are charging you 18%, right? And you're also paying the 18%. I'm sorry, you're paying 6% to OpenTensor.
Yeah.
So it's 6 and then 18. And that's what you want to look for is, like, if you look for example, like if you stake to, I can just speak to them because they're going to be all over every subnet, like Roundtable. Roundtable is going to take 9% of you, but Roundtable on most subnets is going to be running equipment. How do you know? You click on Roundtable, you can see their 9%, and when you go down here to the hotkey, it's Roundtable on most of the subnets. That means that Roundtable is a real validator, or potentially a weight copier, but we know they're not a weight copier. So, and you'll see
Shout
the
out
same
Adam.
thing. What's that?
Shout out Adam.
Right. And you'll see the same thing if you find like, Rizzo on here or whatever, or you'll see like Rizzo is going to be almost all Rizzo across the entire network. That's why people stake to Rizzo, because Rizzo runs all their own hardware, most of their own hardware. Newer subnets, it's harder.
What did you think about Rizzo's insurance? What do you think about that?
Dude, insurance is like, we're all already taking huge risks in crypto. So like, how many of us crypto people probably don't even have health insurance? Like, like it's very targeted at a certain demographic that is a little bit nervous about playing this game and maybe doesn't believe in the technology totally, around securing wallets and those type of things. I think that it could be successful if he's successful at putting it in front of the right teams and kind of keeping the marketing going. It's a unique play, and I like what he's doing simply because he's trying different stuff. Like that's a unique offering to the ecosystem that nobody else is doing, whether you believe in it or not, or think it's something that's going to be, actually be providing security or not. That's up to the individual to decide. I just wanted to highlight too on OpenTensor as well. This is another one where you're going to see almost all OpenTensor on a lot of these subnets, because they're running their own equipment.
Yeah, and I assume you stake to exclusively non-weight copiers?
No. I have certain subnets where I believe that especially where the V-Trust and the incentive around earning the same amount across, like, let me give you an example. Maybe I can find one. Because if you go look for validators that charge 0%, there really aren't many. So I stake personally to many that operate their own equipment, but on subnets where I'm not sure about the validation mechanism because there isn't much variation in between how those validators are essentially operating, I'm not sure there's much value for me going the equipment route versus the 0% take route of someone that I'm fairly sure is copying or child keying, because those are two sort of the same things. A lot of the child keying, of course, is not all of the child keying just takes the exact weights from the validator you're child keying to. If you're child keying to a weight copier, they are typically using an aggregation of the weights that are being generated by all of the other validators to earn a higher level of V-Trust at the expense of maintaining complete integrity of the, sort of consensus mechanism for that subnet. And what's going to basically happen is, as this new version of commit reveal comes out in the near future, you are going to have to, as a subnet, investor, as an alpha swapper, you want to see incentive mechanisms that like vary and accurately have changes in the minor weights, in the sort of the evaluation of the commodities being generated by the miners, so that can take advantage of commit reveal and stop the copying. You know what I'm saying? So like if you're working with a subnet where the weights never change on the miners, it doesn't matter if you're a copier or not, because essentially the incentive mechanism, and some subnets work like this where maybe that's the best way to do it, but it's going to be interesting to see, because just to be honest with this, and we just gotta look at it, because people should know this stuff. Copiers are gaining ground, right? You got Tau Stats, which does they don't run their own equipment anymore. They do a lot of child hotkeying. You've got OpenTensor, who's running a lot of their own equipment. I don't believe Tau 5 runs any equipment as far as I know. They are, as far as I know, the biggest copier. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody.
No, I think that's public knowledge.
Yeah. Rizzo, of course, running equipment, Roundtable running equipment. So we're doing pretty good. We got a child keyer, a hot keyer, and 3 equipment runners in the top 5. That's pretty healthy. After that, you've got Tatsu, copier, Yuma running mostly own equipment, I believe. Let's take a look at them. I don't look at them very often. Yeah, hopefully they're not. I'm sure they're not copying. That would be crazy.
They had a little relay mining incident a couple months ago, or a month or so ago.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm sure they're not then. I don't know. I would just say I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That was just public. Like they swapped their cold key or hot key or something.
Right.
They said that was why.
Here's an unknown validator. This is probably Polychain. I think they've got 400,000 towers. So anyway, Tau.com, mostly child keys, some equipment. Yeah, so these guys are basically Roundtable 21, which means they're child keying to an equipment. So overall, like from a top 10 perspective, ecosystem looking pretty healthy. However, Tatsu was not at this level with this amount of alpha a month ago. You know what I'm saying? And
So people don't care.
people are chasing APR. People are following the incentive. Like, that's what, and honestly, now that we're in a position, it was pretty hard to not go that route early on because you were pretty confident that you were going to be dealing with a clawback mechanism, like a clawback strategy to try and, deal with your alpha decreasing in value while you're holding it, and you need the APR to like get back to 0. Is that happening now? Well, now it doesn't look like it. It looks like we're moving up. So it's much easier to make, I think, long-term decisions that are healthier for the project and in the end yourselves by choosing these validators that are doing things the right way as opposed to going the copier route. But what needs to happen is the commit reveal thing, version 3 comes out and squashes a lot of this stuff and forces the subnet owners to create incentive mechanisms that essentially clean up their own subnet.
Yeah. What do you make of Kraken being a validator now? I've seen something of that. They only had like 10K Tau or something.
Yeah, but that's awesome. Like once the first one does it, then Binance is going to do it. Coinbase is going to, I don't know individually if they're actually going to do it, but why wouldn't they? Like this also creates a situation. Then why wouldn't they hold alpha? Like, maybe you're going to get them even deeper involved in the ecosystem. What you want to see, I mean, like people that are staking, of course, don't want to see this, but the 27% of Tau that's sitting in wallets, and a lot of that's on exchanges, you want to see that participating in the project itself. Because that 27% now is basically responsible for messing with the price. You know what I'm saying? And when Bitcoin goes down, that's 27% is the thing that makes it go down. It's not everybody in the ecosystem dumping the exact amount that's going to have us follow Bitcoin down, from a ratio perspective. It's this Tau that's floating out there in the wild that gets swapped and traded back and forth. And that is responsible for most of the price action on this project. And so you want to see it participating in the project if it takes it, especially out of circulation and doing that weird stuff. That's my feeling on it.
Yeah, and you're talking about Tau on centralized exchanges.
Exactly. Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Somebody asked me this question the other day. I didn't know the answer to it. Tau 5 and Datura, is that the same team?
As far as I know, no.
Okay.
No.
Because I didn't know the answer to it. Yeah, I mean, Keith, this has been a great look around for anybody, I guess. Because this will show, how to navigate the waters that are detailed. So let me wrap it up here. We've gone on for a good one here. So I'll ask you one more.
Sure.
Okay. What advice do you, we've covered detail extensively now, but if you could just end it with one piece of advice for people engaging with detail, I primarily probably from a trading perspective, because I assume that's where the most engagement would come from.
participating in dynamic Tau here isn't just an exercise of trading. It's a sort of an act of governance, and it's a responsibility as a Tau holder to, I believe, participate in this thing up to the full level of risk that you can stomach, because your swapping from Tau to Alpha is essentially a vote for the things that you believe in. And you could day trade the hell out of this thing, whatever. I don't do that. The way that I look at it, and it serves a dual purpose. What's best for me is also best for the ecosystem. If I believe that a team has the long-term ability to deliver value in the form of a digital commodity in the space, if we feed it Bittensor emissions, then I'm happy to take a risk with my Tau, swap into their Alpha, and hold while I watch and wait for that team to deliver. And so that's what I encourage people to do, is make decisions in that way. Don't just look at it for what can I make. Look at it for, what can I help support, and the money will come.
Keith, this is officially the longest podcast.
Yes.
It's always fun chatting.
You said this might be Rogan style, so I cleared my schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. It's great. Talk to you later.